Good evening. How are you? Well, it's after 7, and it hit 99 today, and I was in court out in Winchester, and there apparently is no way to move these proceedings along. There was, 50 cases, and I had one with 3 other attorneys, all in one case together. Judge was very good, moved it along, no impatience, but it takes time. And so when we left after trying to discuss any possible settlement, which doesn't appear apparent, and we got a trial date, I saw the temperature was 99, so I went for a swim on the way back. And a mile indoors, at first I just floated for a few moments. It felt so great. So here I am again, and I've been informed that the yellow light that I observe even has a name among serious photographers, and it's called the golden hour. Various names for it, but it's I think the hour that I'm in again, because the light is that kind of wonderful, warming, yellow, comforting feeling. And I'm on a road with a few trees right now. But it's really pleasant. As a kid, in grammar school, I got what do they call them? Brownie star flashes, and I found a place that I guess it was a pawn shop. And I got, I think my first single lens reflex camera was an Exacta. And by that time I was driving a very inexpensive motorcycle around the city. I probably looked like a thug. And I got my first decent camera there. And then since then I moved on to Nikon. And because you get lenses over time, I've been kind of locked into that, although I also got a Canon and some movie cameras and stuff. It's a great hobby. It's a great way to save things for your family. So what's the news today? There are a couple of things that strike me, and they deal with a different prejudice than the fact that I don't trust any Republicans after Trump, and that we can't move forward with Republican officials running for office because we can't trust any of them. And it's a shame, because I know there are ones out there trying, but it's like we have to have a lavabo, a washing of hands, and move on from the current crop of Republicans as much as we can to restore the republic. Now, that said, there's a Republican judge who's issued a controversial ruling, and he was telling the government that they couldn't tell the U.S. government couldn't tell private companies what to put online. And it's been characterized as the judge is protecting Republicans. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and obviously that would be wrong, but if it was incidental that he was protecting Republicans and had a right-thinking way of approaching it, I could understand that. So how could I possibly say that? Well, because despite the fact we're constantly calling on the government to get it straight and do it right about prosecuting Trump, I have a lot of trouble with what our government does do. We say we're for labor, and then what do? We interfere with the National Labor Relations Act and tell a union that they can't use the powers that are in the statute because, it'd affect America. And now, and this is the principle, the government feels that it can tell people, hey, I don't know if you should have that online. Well, the Ministry of Truth is not our concept of full and fair First Amendment speech. And we've been fooling around with this idea, and I'm not saying that this judge has it right, but my concern is that if the government doesn't like what's happening because it can't control social media, tough. If the notion of the First Amendment is to be free as possible, then the government shouldn't be getting in the way of that. Now, I may be saying more, and I may appear to be rehabilitating the judge, but the principle is a principle that we have to be concerned about. It was no accident that when the confidential and secret Constitutional Convention happened behind closed doors, and everybody thought they were just going to revise the Articles of Confederation, you can be sure there were some really pissed off people that it didn't have a Bill of Rights. And here in Virginia, there were some tremendous leaders in that regard, and they call them the people who were against the Constitution because it didn't have an amendment. And when the dust settled, the First Amendment to the Constitution was freedom of speech. And the reason was, it was the tool by which a government that overreached could be pushed back. And we've seen that's happened. So the problem in our coverage is nuance. Now, this judge who issued this opinion, there'll be appeals, and I think that will be fruitful because we'll get to see the argument. But we can see our court system is flawed right now, F-L-A-W-E-D, and we have to be very careful how it works. Now, another example of things appear to be simple when they're not is the question of affirmative action at Harvard. The Asian community is not united in its support of pushing back affirmative action. And they don't want to be, and this is not how do you define a community this way, but there's a strong pushback among members of the Asian community that they don't want to be caught between two groups, white and black. And we're already hearing the kinds of intelligent criticism, which is, if you were a legacy member of Harvard or any other institution, can you consider that? And you might say, well, isn't that different? Well, is it different if you're a legacy person who profited in terms of being admitted by the fact that there was a discrimination against blacks, when you could pull the legacy card and get into Harvard or name your school of choice? So those are a couple of thoughts I had today. The concentration on the court and these things comes about as a result of the fact that this is when the Supreme Court decisions come out by the end of June, and so we're still reeling from what they mean and the problems that we see with them going forward. The worst thing about a general law is the unintended and often unforeseen consequences of a rule you pass that has outcomes that you didn't understand or appreciate would happen. And we have a lot of that. And it's one of the reasons why when I do litigation, one case at a time, and you have to drill down in cases, there are exceptions of course, but as I've gotten older, I've been both lucky and cursed with having more complicated cases. And I'm past the point where the case is too simple, coffee is enough to keep me interested. Although, when it's important to a client, I've handled those cases, and so then you're really serving an individual. But that's how you see, when practicing in the law, the unforeseen consequences of taking a position, even in litigation. So legislation, it's magnificent. Mix into it the fact that members of Congress and other legislatures, they pass laws that they know have no business being passed, so that they can crow and claim that they're doing so much for the people by supporting those positions. Of course, the problem with that is they don't care. They'll shake their hands. Oh, the courts, look at that. The courts overruled our bad decision, which we knew was bad from the beginning. So these are not things that we should overlook. there's a lot of talk again about, I think this was a ridiculous idea, and it was to make Trump look like he was, I don't know, Jack Kennedy. Now there's an amusing thought. Trump as Jack Kennedy. And what I'm thinking of is his Space Force, which is really a space farce. They have 13,000 members, and nobody knows what they do. And they don't have any special ray guns or anything that could protect us. And they don't have any spaceships that cruise around the Earth. And outside of probably showing people a museum, it's a meaningless group of people that's sucking money for no damn good reason. But that's not unusual. I think it's bad news that Biden is reported as saying that he won't seek to modify the Supreme Court. I think that's a failure of one department to say what's necessary for another department to do, namely the Congress. We can't have a situation in which members join the court that never should be on the court, and then members of the court are corrupt, in the sense of anyone who would vote on a case that involved a close friend who had given them large favors is not an unbiased judge. And the test is, you don't even actually have to be unbiased. The appearance of bias is enough to say, foul, stop doing what you're doing. And it's interesting, two of the worst judges of the collection are doing this. So we have Alito and Thomas. So we have Alito and Thomas, and the three judges that never should have been on the court in the first place. So what do you got there? That's 5 judges. 5 judges of 9. So I've supported from the beginning we should enlarge the court to 13. The number on the court has changed ever since 1789. I think it was called the Judiciary Act. I think it's still called that. And we should adjust accordingly to make it fair. We can't wait until people, pass on or retire, withdraw from their positions on the Supreme Court. A ray of sunshine in the golden hour involves I don't know how to put it. It goes like this. Early on in this mishigas with Trump, I said that you should keep in mind that in Watergate, there are 2 sets of lawyers. There's a horse that doesn't like lawyers. There are 2 sets of lawyers, and one set of lawyers is participating in misconduct, ethical, legal, or whatever. And during Watergate, they were prosecuted. And who were they prosecuted? The other set of lawyers, the good lawyers, in my opinion. And a bunch of lawyers, they were disbarred and they went to prison and stuff like that. Their careers were ruined as should have been. And so what we see now is we see something like that happening now. We have L. Linwood, who's retiring from the practice of law so that they can't disbar him. We got Jeffrey Clark out there. We got Eastman. We got Rudy Giuliani. We got Cindy Powell. We have a whole bunch of lawyers out there, and they're waiting for the hammer to fall. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I can feel the drift now. And the last thing that I think is interesting is there have been subpoenas that have gone to Arizona. Now, we all have focused on Georgia, in which the Secretary of State was leaned upon to give Trump those extra votes, but it wasn't the only place. Apparently, Trump also spoke to Ducey, who's a state official, and it was another close state. I think there were 10,000 votes dividing Trump and Biden, and Trump tried to get him to change the votes. So we're looking at that. When I say we, Black Jack Smith is looking at it. And I've called Black Jack Smith black because I wanted it to be rough and tumble and I wanted it to fit. And I've decided if he's failed, it's ironic. So Jack Smith is out there, and we've seen that he's taken some steps nobody else was taking, and so that's very encouraging. And we're told, and we have a better chance of believing it because of what Smith has done recently, in serving subpoenas and questioning people who came up with these bogus documents that they were electors, and they were the electors that should be chosen so they could overturn the election. So there's a lot going on, and the vectors are inclined in the right direction. We have not yet reached the promised land, but we're not going to be like Moses. We're not going to be left behind. All of us are going across to the promised land. And the promised land, by John Flannery's definition, that is is that Trump goes to the Hooskow. Trump is convicted. Trump does not become president again. And all the people who align themselves with him and thought they could do dramatic and terrible things right now because Trump would pardon them, well, they don't get that chance. A lot noisier on this road. I have to keep that in mind. So, between horses and traffic. So, from my position on a road that has golden sun and some trees, I bid adieu until tomorrow. All the best from my nearby Cathedral of Trees. Bye-bye.